So some friends of mine recently got involved in racing go-karts. So I wanted to make one. So I made a turbo diesel go-kart. Let me show you. So it kind of started out as a joke, sitting around one night and just kind of talking to the go-kart guys and saying, you know, had anyone ever done a diesel? And no one had, and basically everyone runs some version of this chassis, but with like a Predator 212 or a Ghost or some form of 212 to 224 cc kind of Honda clone. And I was like, well, you know, a diesel would be cool, but I don't know if it would be within the class limits or whatever. And class limits pretty much went out the window right off the rip. It's backyard racing. It's not anything official. So, you know, it's kind of like rules. So this is actually the second chassis. And I think I got some clips I can throw in here of the original chassis. So if you want to be competitive, this is what you do. So naturally, I'm doing something completely different. I was gifted this chassis. I'm going to use it for the time being until it turns out that it doesn't work, which is slightly inevitable. This is a straight line center chassis configuration instead of offset. That's for the time being. I may cut and over. It's a 418 cc 10 horse diesel from Temu, you know, just to see if this thing can be competitive with an engine that's half the size, turning twice the RPM. And so far, I have converted it to electric start. You obviously can't see, but behind here is a stator with a magneto setup. Pulled the flywheel off, installed a ring gear for the starter, installed the starter, and I've also got the voltage regulator for it. So this thing will have fully functional electric start, fully functional charging system. On the crank side, I'm going to be running a 14 tooth clutch. I think it's 14, and like a 41 tooth spring. It is going to be getting a turbo. So the other night I got out here and cut out an intake flange and an exhaust flange and also a mounting plate. And I'm waiting on the turbo at this point. It's going to be the same turbo as what was on the first iteration of the diesel golf cart. So as far as the chassis is concerned, it's free. It's kind of a piece of shit. It had these horrible welds for this fuel tank setup, and this thing's obviously been fucked with over the years. You notice this cart has these side bolsters for like a body. This one doesn't have that. I'm gonna need to cut these two things off and get them kind of over a little bit. I'm gonna go look at some seats tomorrow, see if I can find one that fits, and that's gonna help kind of determine what I'm gonna do with the steering. But at this point, I really can't do anything until the engine's mounted. Can't do that until the clutch stuff comes in, because it's going to determine my side to side. So a lot of talking, sorry for that. Pretty much just need to walk you guys through how this is going to work. But that thing was a piece of shit, and it was free, and it was kind of a proof of concept. You know, could a diesel engine conceivably run a circle track dirt go-kart? And the answer was probably.
Like from a Toy Story.
We're not aiming for the blood! After that first chassis, it wasn't no. And then this one kind of fell into my hands. So this is a Margay. I don't know the year. Somebody who's more into karts than me could probably tell me the year. And word of warning, it is cut and modified. So if you're a Margay purist or something, maybe look away. So I got the engine brand new, took it out of the crate, didn't even put oil in it, as I was working on it. Like the first time that this thing was fired, it was in the cart, turbo plumbed, everything. So I made the flanges myself, and I made this pipe. This is actually 4 sections welded together. I'm pretty pleased with the clearance for the injector line. That came out pretty good. And other than that, it's stock fuel, stock motor, honestly, just with the turbo added. Made the exhaust. This used to be on the SS16 like 10 years ago. It's actually a Harley Davidson muffler that's been cut and gutted, so it's a straight pipe. So then a couple things that we did here, and I gotta say shout out to Cars and Cameras that did a similar build, and also shout out to their comment section. So the way that these motors have a breather is there's a ball valve, like a ball check valve in here, and as the rocker cover pressurizes, it allows that gas to go through this check valve and back into the intake manifold. So it's kind of, I wouldn't call it EGR, but it basically dumps the breather back into the intake. And if you pressurize the intake, then this check valve can't do its job, which means that the crankcase is building up a bunch of pressure. You don't want that. So I just ran a -4 bulkhead through it. This is temporary. At some point, I'll probably do a like a catch can or something. And then it's got electric start, wired in a battery with a simple lawnmower ignition switch. And that's kind of it. So, you know, by the time I was making my first lap with this thing, it had been put together with kind of some guesses on the gearing. So it's got a 14-tooth clutch and currently has a 50-tooth drive sprocket. The first time I raced it, it had a 45-tooth, and that was fine for the straightaways, but in the corners it lugged really bad, and we'll get to that in a second. So I put this 50-tooth on it to lose a little bit of top-end speed, which you don't really need, and pick up some acceleration coming out of the corners. It's running number 40 roller chain from Tractor Supply. Nothing special. That's kind of it. So anyway, put this thing on the track. Had no idea how good it was going to do, if it was going to work at all. It's definitely slower than the gas carts, but not to the point where, you know, you can't keep up with people and you can't have fun with it. So I think there's a pretty good opportunity here to try to make this thing work. And, you know, I like building stuff that's different, that either hasn't been done before or shouldn't exist or what have you, just because I kind of enjoy the journey more than the destination. And that's definitely true in this case. But the issue that we're having with this car right now is trying to get the smoke. And it's one of those things where, you know, the eye level of your average racer is probably somewhere about here. So the stack does an okay job of getting the exhaust up into the air, but unless there's like a favorable breeze, it kind of hangs there, it drifts around. It's not the nicest. So you'll notice that for everything that there is here, there is not a boost gauge. So I have a boost gauge coming. I'm going to make a little pod console thing for it on the steering shaft here. And we got to figure out why it's so smoky. Is the turbo too big? Is there a intake manifold leak? You know, is this leaking? Is this leaking? Could this be leaking? The other thing, I don't have the fuel turned up. I do have the fuel stop removed, so it can command the most amount of fuel that a stock setup can run. I have not increased the actual volume of fuel. But what I can do is I can remove some shims from under this cover. This is where the cam lobe drives the injection pump, and that should advance the timing, which that might clean it up a little bit. You know, is this air filter a restriction? I don't know. So need to do some diagnosis on it to figure out why it's so smoky and kind of take it from there. But this thing's a blast, and hopefully I'll get some cool clips of it. It's got nice new dirt tires on it, slicks. I do have a set of shitty slicks that I don't mind putting on pavement. So probably what's going to happen is I'll put the shitty tires back on it. I'll take the cross out of the front end so that it steers straight, and then take it down the road and see what it makes for boost and kind of take it from there. So this is just kind of an introductory video to it. And this is something that I've been jamming out, working on for the last couple weeks. No real major modifications to the frame other than you can see I moved the steering over probably about 4 or 5 inches or so. And then I also, in order to do that, had to put a rag joint in there, or a universal joint. And then I also did a Amazon quick disconnect steering wheel, and then the Kirky race seat. But, you know, had to make my own plate for the motor. But otherwise, you know, I didn't build this chassis or nothing. Pretty much the way it came. So some cool fab work on it if you look close. But for the most part, it's just a go-kart with a diesel motor in it. So there we go. Hopefully I get some more videos on it in the future. And if you got any questions about it, leave them in the comments. Be happy to answer them. See you guys soon.